United Nations Security Council holds a meeting to discuss the situation in Yemen. U.S. Research Center says path to peace in Yemen and recovery remain fragile. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula increases attacks against government forces in southern parts of Yemen. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news of me, Shazad Delbey. The UN Security Council holds its closed meeting on Yemen to discuss latest military and political developments in the country. Hans Grunberg, the UN Special Envoy, is expected to brief the Council members about his late visits to China, Japan, and the Gulf, where he sought to find a unified international approach towards ending the conflict in Yemen. Also, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs Chief and Michael Berry, head of the UNMAHA in Hudaydah, are scheduled to brief the Council. The Yemeni government welcomed the final statement issued by the governmental meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council. In addition, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs appreciated GCC affirmation on full support for the Presidential Leadership Council in achieving security and stability in Yemen and its efforts to reach a political solution in accordance with the Gulf Initiative. Almost 9 years into a civil war, life in Yemen remains brutal for millions in the country. An American research center said the way for peace remains fragile. This report has more details.
Nearly 9 years into a lengthy civil conflict, life in Yemen remains brutally difficult for millions of people. After 2 years of being unable to reliably survey Yemen, Gallup World Poll, an American analytics company, found that a record high of 7 in 10 Yemenis struggled to procure food in late 2022 and early 2023. More than a year has gone since a UN-brokered peace agreement has resulted in a ceasefire between Yemen's warring groups. While it ended in October of last year, the truce has mostly maintained and peace talks have gained traction. However, the security situation remains precarious, and Yemen is in the grip of a humanitarian crisis. Aside from chronic hunger, millions of Yemenis must contend with a damaged economy and widespread healthcare concerns. The most recent Gallup poll in Yemen excludes numerous geographical areas due to ongoing security concerns, small size, or remoteness. Approximately 23% of the population resides in those locations. The conflict has placed a great deal of strain on Yemen's health sector. Disease outbreaks such as cholera, diphtheria, and most recently COVID-19 are common. According to the World Health Organization, over half of all health facilities in the nation are out of service or only partially operational. More than 1 in 4 Yemenis overall stated that health issues prohibited them from engaging in activities that persons their age could typically perform. Approximately 4 out of 5 Yemenis aged 50 and over reported having such chronic health issues, the highest percentage of this group in any nation in the world. This indicates that the health crisis in Yemen is disproportionately affecting older people. Yemen's economy, which has declined since the start of the conflict, has been crippled by almost a decade of war. In 2022, almost half of Yemenis reported that living on their current income is extremely hard. 2/3 of Yemenis believe that their local economy is anticipated to get worse rather than better. While the UN truce last year has brought a lot of tangible benefits to Yemenis, such as the decline of cross-border attacks and the entry of fuel into the country, the list of immediate humanitarian concerns in Yemen is long. Ensuring that people's basic needs are met continues to be an enormous challenge for the international aid community.
The security services in the interim capital Aden managed to seize modern communication devices used to control drones which were on their way to the Houthi militia. The security services found a number of devices hidden in medical cartons inside a truck, indicating that investigations confirmed that these devices are used to control drones by means of radio waves.
كان في معي بيت وفي معي كان لنا أرض كنت أزرعها وكان في معي يعني كنت أخرج بأمان وأرجع بأمان للبيت طبيعي. والله كنت عايش هناك ما شاء الله بحالة سليمة وكنت مرتاح الحمد لله. الحرب خلنا احنا شتت نخرج للمنطقة دي. السبب أولاً لما انتقلت من هناك لهنا، أولاً حط المشاكل هذه ونحن من المنطقة الوسطى، كان هنا في عدو هنا في عدو ونحن من المنطقة الوسطى، لازم أن أخرج أهلي وأخرج نفسي بسلامة من هذا المكان. والله أول ما وصلت لهنا أولاً جلست يعني قلت لي عيدة وقلت لي كان في معي طربل صغير، عملت الطربل هذا. أولاً كنت ما فيش معي أي حاجة ضللت تحته أولاً ثاني ما كنت يعني لما أنام أولاً إن أنا أحاول أخلي أول الجهال وضعك يعود المكان هذا ما فيش معنا نفس مكان.
The danger of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is growing in the southern provinces. A recent incident took place in Shabwa in which 2 soldiers were killed and 5 others were injured by gunmen east of the city. This report has more details.
Clashes between suspected Al-Qaeda militants and Yemen's pro-government forces in the country's south killed 3 men, as a military official and tribal leaders said. 3 Yemeni soldiers were killed and 3 others were injured on Sunday morning when Al-Qaeda militants attacked their outpost in the southern province of Shabwa. This was Al-Qaeda's bloodiest strike on government troops in the south in months. The fighting broke out Saturday evening when militants thought to be Al-Qaeda members attacked the United Arab Emirates-backed Shabwa Defense Forces with machine guns. 2 tribal leaders and military officials said. They said that the gun battle in the oil-rich province lasted for several hours, killing 2 Shabwa Defense Forces fighters and 1 militant before the militants finally withdrew. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula active in several regions in Yemen, including Shabwa and other far-flung provinces, and is considered to be one of the most dangerous branches of the terror network. A prominent member of Al-Qaeda was killed in February in a suspected U.S. drone attack. Amid years of chaos and conflict, the militant group has cemented a strong foothold in areas of the country, particularly in the remote east and south of the Arab nation. The conflict in Yemen has killed over 150,000 people, including over 14,500 civilians, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, creating one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. There has been a lull in the fighting since the 6-month ceasefire agreement, which was reached in April 2022. The truce expired in October 2022, however, back-channel negotiations between Saudi and Houthi officials have been ongoing for months.
Local sources said Bani Matad tribes in Sana'a are carrying out an open-ended sit-in in a Sabain square in Sana'a. The sources added that Bani Matad tribes set up an open sit-in camp to protest against the Houthi militia's kidnapping of one of their sheikhs. Coming next in the news. On World Day Against Child Labor, children in Yemen continue to bear the brunt of the conflict. Welcome back. On World Day Against Child Labor, Yemeni children continue to bear the brunt of the conflict. Due to hard living conditions, a large number of children has been forced into labor to provide for their families. This report has more details.
Today marks the World Day Against Child Labor. This day is intended to serve as a catalyst for the growing worldwide movement against child labor and emphasizing the link between social justice and child labor. The slogan for the World Day in 2023 is Social Justice for All and Child Labor. According to the UN Joint Experience in Tackling Child Labor over the course of the last 3 decades, has demonstrated that child labor can be eliminated if the root causes are addressed. At a time when the world celebrates the International Day Against Child Labor, in Yemen these children and thousands of others stand for hours in the heat of the sun. They sell water and tissues on the streets and go on tours to obtain money, in order to provide their families with an additional source of income, so that they get the chance to live a decent and safe life in a war-torn country that the Houthi militia imposed 9 years ago, forcing many families to leave their homes and lose their source of income.
I leave home in the early morning and stay outside till night. I sell water bottles in order to get money so we can pay the rent of our home. My father is injured and he can't work.
Here in one of the mechanics' workshops in Ma'rib, many children work hard beyond their physical ability for more than 3 years after they were displaced from the war. Displacement, war, and the high cost of living took them from the schools to the early labor market, after their families became without a breadwinner surrounded by complex living conditions, which forced their children to go out and look for work with a sufficient income to provide the requirements of their house and the needs of their families.
Children in Yemen are exposed to the most severe types of violations by the Houthis, including labor in workshops and on the streets. The Houthi militias are trying to make children in Yemen a ticking time bomb so they can use them in their war.
According to UNICEF, the ongoing war has deepened the suffering of poor families in Yemen, and children have paid the bill for this war. More than 17% of Yemeni children between the ages of 5 and 17 have engaged in work, equivalent to about 3.1 million children, and the number is still in continuous increase with the deterioration of the economic and living situation in the country.
A recent international human rights report confirmed that Houthis teach children in summer centers a culture of violence. The American Center for Justice said in a report that 7 books focus on the policy of the Houthi group in a number of issues, describing it as correct and others as false and distorted, in addition to citing sectarian ideology. Sources revealed that the Houthi militia is holding a number of cargo ships in the ports of Hodeidah. The sources indicated that the rebels hijacked a cargo ship days after unloading its cargo. The ship had arrived in the ports of Hodeidah more than 20 days ago. The Iran-backed Houthi militia prevented the private sector in its areas of control from importing frozen chicken for a period of 6 months. The militia forced the merchants to buy frozen chicken from what it described as local producers. For decades, local products and farmers failed to cover the market with local production, and the ability of chicken farmers to work declined after Houthi taxes on them. The Houthi siege on Taiz has doubled the economic suffering of citizens. This report has more details.
Abdulrahman, who works as a government employee, loses a large part of his monthly salary from time to time due to the continued decline of the rial in front of foreign currencies. He could no longer obtain his simplest requirements of life at a reasonable price. Even the necessities are out of reach.
The salary of the employee is trivial, especially in light of the rise in prices and the local currency weakness against the dollar. The salary not enough even for a bag of flour of sugar. Since 2014, we've been suffering from the war, the siege and the devaluation of the local currency.
Many citizens here in Taiz believe that the government is violating the right to a decent life by mismanaging the country's economy. This resulted in the deterioration of the local currency and the rise in the prices of food and consumer commodities, as well as the high cost of living.
The current rise in prices indicates that the government is not functional on the ground. The real exchange rate against the Saudi currency reached today in Taiz 358. The government is doing nothing about it. Famine is increasing and there are no public service at all.
Observers say that the government is almost incapable of implementing any mechanisms that would improve the living conditions of citizens and families.
The economic situation is full of imbalances that created more pressures on the public finances and a decrease in revenues. For example, the crude oil is suspended 8 months ago after Houthi attacks on oil facilities. Opening the port of Hodeidah diverted shipping movement from the government-held ports as well and resulted in a decrease in custom duties.
It is strange that the government continues to make promises related to facing the economic crisis in the country without any indication that it will be fulfilled.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. UN Security Council holds a meeting to discuss the situation in Yemen. U.S. research center says path to peace in Yemen and recovery remain fragile. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula increases attacks against government forces in southern parts of Yemen. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.